Today was by far the biggest and most productive day for the project so far. I spent an insane amount of time working on the game today, but honestly, it finally feels like all the systems are starting to connect together into something much bigger than just a small prototype. The first thing you probably noticed immediately is how much the lobby screen changed compared to yesterday. I added a massive amount of new UI elements and progression systems. At the top of the screen, I polished the gear icons even more and also added the main currencies of the game, so players can instantly understand their progression and resources the moment they enter the lobby. In the middle section, I added the player's current stats so you can actually track your overall power and progression over time. This is something I really wanted because progression is one of the most important parts of games like this. Players need to constantly feel stronger little by little every time they play. I also added the current stage information, the high score system, and more details that make the lobby feel much more alive instead of just being a few buttons on a screen. At the bottom of the lobby, I started building some of the main progression systems of the game. Right now, there are tabs for things like Workshop, Cards, Tech, and Shop. Most of these systems are still extremely early versions, and honestly, half of them barely work yet. But the important thing is that the foundations are finally there. The biggest system I focused on today was definitely the Workshop. This is where players can spend currencies earned during gameplay in order to permanently improve their character. I added all kinds of upgrades like critical chance, HP regeneration, support bonuses, survivability upgrades, and many more smaller stat boosts. My goal with this system is to slowly create hundreds of meaningful upgrades over time so players always feel like there is something new to unlock or improve. One thing I realized while working on this today is how important progression pacing really is in games like this. If players unlock things too quickly, the game becomes boring, but if progression is too slow, the game starts feeling frustrating. So a huge part of today was honestly just experimenting with balancing numbers and trying to make upgrades feel satisfying to purchase. I also spent a huge amount of time polishing the graphics and overall aesthetic again. Compared to day one, the difference is honestly massive now. The UI is cleaner, the colors fit together better, the icons look more professional, the enemies are more readable, the background feels less empty, and overall the game is finally starting to look like an actual product instead of just random placeholder assets thrown together. I still want to keep the graphics simple and minimalistic though. One mistake I see a lot of mobile games make is adding way too much visual noise everywhere. I want the game to feel clean and cozy while still having enough effects and polish to feel satisfying. Another thing I focused on today was making the game feel more connected. Yesterday it still felt like a bunch of separate systems, but now with the new lobby, currencies, upgrades, stats, and progression tabs, it finally feels like there is an actual gameplay loop starting to form. And honestly, that is one of the most exciting moments when developing a game. Seeing all the separate pieces slowly come together into something playable is extremely motivating. Now let's move into the actual gameplay screen because that also changed a lot today. I finalized most of the middle and bottom UI sections during combat. The currencies now look much cleaner and easier to understand, and I improved the layout of the entire screen to make everything feel less cluttered. I also improved the enemies and overall environment visuals again. The green background especially looks much more polished and professional now compared to the earlier versions. It is still simple, but now it actually has the cozy vibe I was aiming for. At the bottom of the gameplay screen, I expanded the upgrade system even more. Previously, there were only the basic categories like attack, defense, and support, but today I added a completely new tab called W.M.D, which stands for Weapons of Mass Destruction. I do not want to spoil too much yet because I still have a ton of ideas I want to experiment with first, but let's just say this system is probably going to become one of the craziest and most fun parts of the entire game. I want players to eventually unlock absurd upgrades and abilities that completely change the battlefield. Things like giant explosions, screen-wide attacks, overpowered abilities, and other ridiculous mechanics that make the late game feel insane. I think games become way more memorable when they allow players to eventually break the game in fun ways. Another thing I noticed while testing today is that the game is slowly starting to become genuinely addictive already. Even though there is still barely any content compared to what I eventually want, the loop of defeating enemies, upgrading stats, and watching numbers grow already feels surprisingly satisfying. And honestly, that is probably the biggest sign that the project is moving in the right direction. Of course, there is still a ridiculous amount of work left to do. Most systems are unfinished. The balancing is still all over the place. A lot of the UI still needs animations and polish, and many features are still just ideas in my notebook. But compared to day one, the progress already feels huge. Tomorrow, I want to continue expanding the progression systems even more, improve the gameplay feel, and maybe start adding some of the first truly unique mechanics into combat. I also want to continue polishing the visuals because I think the art direction is finally starting to move toward the exact style I imagined at the beginning of the project. If you want to follow the development of this game from the very beginning, make sure to subscribe because I am planning to continue uploading every single day and documenting the entire journey, including all the successes, failures, bugs, and experiments along the way. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.